Hello, welcome, and welcome back, folks, for the second day of programming of the National Day of Remembrance, co-sponsored by the Smithsonian Institution, the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation, and the National Park Service. My name is Erin, and I'm the moderator for this session, which is called Historic Preservation and Engagement Through the Arts. As we did for each of the sessions yesterday and this morning, before we begin, I want to invite each of us, as we gather together virtually, to acknowledge the Native peoples whose ancestral homelands we currently occupy, and to learn more about the past and presence of the vibrant Native communities who make their homes here today. As we mark the significance of this anniversary for Nikkei communities across North America, let us not, in doing so, cover over the backdrop of enslavement, genocide, and removal that animates American history. I am so incredibly fortunate to be joined today for this session by 5 powerful community members and artists whose work is thought-provoking, moving, and deeply rooted in a kind of care that pushes us to grow. Over the course of the next hour, we will hear from Nikki Nojima Lewis, Erin Shigaki, Derek Mio, Traci Kato-Kiriyama, and Setsuko Winchester about their artistic practices and the ways that art can serve both to preserve and to engage, particularly around complex and at times painful histories. There will be, as always, time for questions later in the program, so please leave any questions or thoughts you might like to share with our panelists in the chat, and we will get to as many as possible. With that, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome our first speaker, Nikki Nojima Lewis. Nikki's artistic journey began as a childhood survivor of Minidoka. In 1985, she wrote her first play, Breaking the Silence, based on Issei and Nisei oral histories. She currently creates and tours readers' theater plays on the Japanese-American experience for the New Mexico JACL in Albuquerque. Nikki, I always love hearing your stories and hearing about your work, so thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Erin. It's a pleasure, and greetings from Albuquerque. So I am really Shirley Sadayo, Nikki Nojima Lewis. I was named after Shirley Temple. My thoughts today are very much on history and story and coming full circle, both in personal and historical ways. On December 7th, 1941, I had just celebrated my 4th birthday when the FBI entered my home in Seattle, Washington, and took my father away. He was held in enemy alien camps in Lordsburg and Santa Fe, New Mexico, until 1945. And my mother and I were incarcerated in Minidoka, Idaho, until 1945. Then she and I were part of the diaspora that swept us up to the Midwest, and I grew up in Chicago. My dad returned to Seattle from Santa Fe, and we never lived together as a family again. I think my artistic journey began as a child performer on the stages of talent shows in Camp Minidoka. I did tell you that I am named after Shirley Temple. In 1950s Chicago, I was a teenage dancer with professional companies where I was the only person of color. Later, back in Seattle, I performed with a number of women's peace shows with the multicultural theater company, The Group, and the Northwest Asian American Theater. And all of this propelled me into theater writing. Holly Yasui has called me a collagist, and I think that's true. I create collages of oral histories and research, music, and poetry. I strive to create ways for people to inhabit the stories that I present and to inhabit history. So here's a slide of my first show. I didn't know I was a playwright. It's called Breaking the Silence. It was written in 1985 and was based on generational themes. Issei, the first generation for immigration. Nisei, second generation, incarceration. Sansei, for redress and activism and breaking the silence. Music and poetry are at the heart of my plays. But during the writing of Breaking the Silence, I was overwhelmed by the research and the density of material. I had hundreds of pages of script and I couldn't find the forest for the trees. And then a friend gave me a dissertation on tanka poetry. And these poems gave me a narrative arc from days of spacious dreams. I sailed for America, overblown with hope, to something that inspired the opening narration of my play. I called it Singing Headlines. During World War II, all Americans of Japanese descent living on the West Coast were removed from their homes and put into prison camps. Executive Order number 906 deprived us of our rights, although we never had been accused of any crime. 120,000 Japanese Americans. And then, of course, one thing leads to another. And then I have to tell you the story of Shingo, a man who left on a 5-year work contract to America. And on the day of his departure, he goes to his village shrine and gathers sands from the shrine and vows to return in 5 years. And then he's escorted to the edge of the village by taiko drummers. Or the woman who composed poems in her head while working all day in the fields and writing them down late at night by candlelight in the corner of a community tent full of sleeping souls. And then years later, during the roundup, she burns all her manuscripts in the backyard of her home. All of the memories of her journey in America, she said, went up in flames. So writing Breaking the Silence led to commissions from the Washington State Centennial, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and the Smithsonian exhibit, I Dream a World, Black Women Who Changed America. But it's been in New Mexico that I have explored my own relationship between history and my work. I came here in 2007 on a fellowship to the Santa Fe Art Institute, and I began to discover the little-known stories of Lordsburg and Santa Fe, both inside and outside the barbed wire of the camps. So I formed a company that's largely made up of New Mexico JACL members. And since 2014, we've toured every year to diverse and underserved communities in the state. Here are some examples. Citizen Men in New Mexico. In 2016, the JCL players toured with Holly Yasui on her play on her father, Citizen Men. We did 8 shows in 11 days. Whew. Then from Days of Infamy to Days of Remembrance is a commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the signing of the executive order. And here we are now, the 80th anniversary. Nisei, the Greatest Generation. A tribute to the children of Japanese immigrants who grew up during the Great Depression, reached maturity during World War II, and served their country in a variety of ways, as soldiers, as protesters, and as survivors of a mass incarceration by their own government. And courage and compassion. This is from our most recent Day of Remembrance performance last Saturday, February 12th. It was taken from the title of a Go for Broke exhibit that we partnered with, because we need kindness and courage and compassion and solidarity more than ever today. So I'd like to end on a theme of ancestry and legacy. I learned that my step-grandmother had also been a tanka poet. So here are words of hers. Now that the testing of the pioneer is over, the door to the moon is open. Ah, the human spirit. It is limitless. Full circle indeed. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Nikki. That was wonderful. Now, I'm delighted to introduce Erin Shigaki. Erin is a Yonsei born and raised in Seattle, Washington, who creates work that is community-based and focused on BIPOC experiences, often the World War II incarceration of her own Japanese American community. Erin believes that wielding art and activism to tell these stories can educate, redress, and incrementally heal. Erin, thank you so very much for being here with us today and for sharing your work.
Hi, everyone. I am coming at you from the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present. And this weekend, I've had the fortune of attending several Day of Remembrance events and have, felt the community love and the sort of full range of emotions that this event provokes in us. And I'm really happy to get to do one more. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my career. I started out as a graphic designer, and the first large-scale design work I did was for the Wing Luke Museum, which is a National Park Service affiliated area and the first Smithsonian affiliate in the Pacific Northwest. I was offered a chance to join the first exhibit design team for the museum without any prior experience working at large scale. And this was afforded because the museum is truly run by community. My passion and care for and history in the community was as important as any specific professional experience. In the handful of years since I returned home to Seattle from Brooklyn, I've found grounding in the Asian American community that I was raised in. I've become active with the Minidoka Pilgrimage Planning Committee, which runs pilgrimages to the concentration camp in southern Idaho, where many Seattle area Japanese Americans were incarcerated during World War II. And I work with Tsuru for Solidarity, a nonviolent direct action project of Japanese American social justice advocates working toward abolition across the spectrum. Both of these organizations offer layers of engagement, among them education and healing. So when my eyes were first opened to the possibility of working in public art, I already knew what stories I wanted to tell. Here are photographs of just a few of the dozens of my relatives who are imprisoned in the Minidoka concentration camp. My grandmother, Yasuko, holds my father, who was born there, delivered by a horse veterinarian. My grandmother, Mitsuko, and grandfather, Seigo, were matched and married there. My ancestors are my heart. I tell these stories to honor their resilience, resistance, and survival. I tell them because it's undertaught and often erased history. Indeed, these histories are still being erased. 2 years ago, a high-level administrator at a local college whited out a passage I wrote about a local land tycoon and vocal anti-Japanese agitator named Miller Freeman. His family continues to profit off land they gained when the Japanese American community was rounded up. In lieu of the College Board's attempt to control the story, the Japanese American community led our own healing ceremony. And I think it's important to share with people that this is a moment where I felt the intergenerational trauma of the incarceration like a dirty knife. That trauma made me doubt that we deserved a gathering, a reckoning, an apology. And at this very moment, the sanctity of the Minidoka National Historic Site is being threatened by a proposed massive wind farm. And so we again fight to protect the physical manifestation of what our ancestors endured. It follows that I tell these stories so that my community can heal from these traumas, so tightly intertwined with the history of legislation and propaganda against Asian people. And finally, I tell these stories to draw connections between our experiences and those of all Black, Indigenous, and communities of color. I try to encourage an introspection of the supremacist myths that hold us apart and that have planted anti-Blackness and internalized racism within us. I try to encourage that we use our moral authority to move further than our place of relative privilege. I began this presentation emphasizing the word community. It bears repeating that I'm grateful and honored to have a practice that engages beloved community, invites folks to help create public art pieces, and intentionally bridges connections between organizations and communities. My ancestors are my heart. My goal and purpose is to tell the Japanese American story in memory of my ancestors and in service of the liberation of all people. What kind of ancestors do we want to be? Thank you for your time. Keep in touch and take good care of each other.
Thank you so much, Erin. That was powerful. And I love that my ancestors are my heart. I've been feeling that and thinking about that a lot through our programming this weekend. Next, I'm so delighted to introduce our next speaker, Derek Mio. Derek stars in AMC's The Terror Infamy and has appeared in several commercials, television shows, and films. One of his grandfather's family was from Terminal Island and was incarcerated at Manzanar, while his other grandfather served in the MIS. Derek, thank you so much for being here. Derek, I'm so sorry, you are muted.
Of course I am. I've done this before. Hey, everybody. Thank you, Erin, for having me. That's what I was saying. And thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm really pleased to be a part of this panel and to talk about how the community and my family have informed me being an actor. And I also do some stand-up comedy as well, and a little bit of filmmaking. And when I think about it, that can be directly traced back to my family and the community. Getting to act in The Terror was just, it really was the most profound experience of my life, because it was, putting the Japanese American internment on such a larger stage than we're normally seeing it on AMC as a series, even though it's a horror show. It's produced by Ridley Scott, and it's really great if you're a fan of the genre. But please check it out. It's on Hulu and Amazon Prime right now. But it was just really a special experience for me, not only because I'm a descendant of an incarceree. My grandpa, George Mio, his family went to Manzanar. But also the show starts out in Terminal Island, where my grandpa and his family grew up. It was an actual immigrant community. And so I was really excited to be a part of this, and really channeled some real life experiences that my family went through. And there's some scenes that really mirror exactly what happened at the end of the first episode. When they take away all the elders, that actually happened to my great grandfather, because he was a community leader in Terminal Island. But so anyway, there were so many parallels. So I was so happy to be a part of that production. But if you want to go back to how or I became an actor, you would, I you know, and kind of self-reflecting and everything. It goes back to, you know, my mother, and she's a very theatrical person. She could have been an actress, but you know, she was in education her whole career, but just so much energy, and she used to do impressions of you know, family members, strangers, celebrities, whoever, when we were younger. So I would do impressions, you know, and I loved SNL and Dana Carvey, and I just, you know, this was kind of normal to me. So I would do impressions. There's like a video of me doing, you know, George Bush Sr. and, you know, basically ripping off Dana Carvey. But you go back even further. Okay, how did, you know, so my mom was born in Tokyo, and she was born in Tokyo because my grandfather, Stanley Kaizawa, was from Hawaii. He was in the MIS, and he went over to Japan after the war, and his assignment was to censor kabuki theater. And because he had a high level of Japanese, so he would be reading, he was a script reader, you know, of kabuki scripts. And so he had a theatricality, a kind of dramatic flair to him. And so that's okay. Maybe that gets passed down to me. So I become an actor, and I go to USC Film School because a family friend who had served in the MIS with my grandfather, his son graduated from USC Film School. And so he wrote me a letter of recommendation, and I go to USC Film School, and that's when I start acting. And then my mom's or my aunt sends me a clipping of a short film that takes place in the Japanese American internment camps, and I play a baseball player. This was Chris Tashima's Day of Independence, and so that goes to a film festival, and I met my manager, and I, you know, meet my agent, and now I'm in a position to audition for something like The Terror. So it comes full circle. As to how I even got into this business, it comes back to, you know, my family and the community. So now I'm trying to shed light on that whole aspect of you know, my family. So I was working on a documentary, conducting interviews about different family members and their artistic pursuits. And, you know, when I started doing stand-up comedy like 4 years ago, and I was incorporating, you know, jokes about what were the chants like at these baseball games in the internment camps. It probably went something like, "This is not right. Take us out of this prison, give us back all our stuff." You know, finding different ways to bring that history into the work so that we can, you know, educate people that might not know of this injustice. And the real revelation of The Terror is that I'd get messages from people from all over the world, or even within our own country, that didn't even know that this actually took place here in the United States. So that's been very eye-opening, and I'm happy that it's you know spreading word and getting to educate people about this part of our history. So and this is this my family's cafe in Terminal Island. And so I feel, you know, when I was coming up, when I was a lot younger, as an actor, I didn't see a lot of Asian representation. You're seeing it exploding now, which is wonderful. And there was a part of me that was saying, you know, there's not a lot of representation. I've got to represent, you know. And so I'm happy that I was able to be a part of that show. But you know, all the artists here today and in the industry are inspiring me to, you know, create and so I am, writing and developing some projects to tell more stories that haven't been told or that people don't know about. So yeah, please check it out, and thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share that. And I guess I'll give it back to Erin. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you so much, Derek. That was great. I didn't know that story about your grandfather in the MIS and Kabuki theater. That's great. That's such a wonderful way to think about ancestry and your art and all of these things.
It's crazy. It comes full circle, and it just keeps going, I guess. It never stops.
Yeah. And I'm remembering the first time we met when you were talking with Min Tonai during Tadaima, and Dan Kwong was there, and he was part of that film you were talking, the baseball film as well. It's great. Art and
No, thanks for having me and allow me to reflect on it all, and to reconnect with everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry, I just took myself out by accident. We will see you back during the Q&A. Now, I'm so happy to introduce Traci Kato-Kiriyama. Traci is a multi-transdisciplinary artist, organizer, educator, principal, writer, and performer with Pole Project Ensemble, which is an NEFA awardee for Tales of Clamor that I think we'll hear a bit about today. Traci is author of the gorgeous book Navigating Without Instruments, and director/co-founder of Tuesday Night Project and presenter of Tuesday Night Cafe since 1999, which is the longest running public arts series in the country. So Traci, it is really and truly an honor to have you here with us today. I know this has been a busy weekend for you, but we're so happy to have you here sharing about your work.
Thanks so much, Erin. Oh my gosh, I'm having such a good time watching everybody's presentations. I'm really inspired and, just always honored to be in these spaces to just keep learning more. When I was thinking about historic preservation, I was thinking about, how historic preservation is really well served when we proactively connect with the needs of the present. And in terms of engagement, I think it's an opportunity to build time and space and relations through our creative gatherings and through our artistic communication. So I wanted to talk through 3 projects really quickly. You can see here on the bottom of the screen, Tuesday Night Project. I invite you to check that out later when you can, or you can even pop that open while I'm speaking. I'm coming to you from the unceded lands of the Tongva lands in Los Angeles County, also shared with the Chumash, the Gabrielino, Tataviam, and we are also connected here through different platforms that, stretch us across this land. So I'm really, I feel completely connected with every single person on this call. And, with our space in Little Tokyo, Tuesday Night Cafe that started in February of 1999, we came at a time where the Little Tokyo here in Los Angeles was, it was considered to be like sort of like dead after dark. And there was a lot of fear that there would be sort of another Japantown that would fail. And we were implored as young artists by our community to bring more people in. Little Tokyo Service Center, Visual Communications, and East West Players all supported us in doing something in this little courtyard, the Atatani courtyard, in front of the Union Center for the Arts. And so we just came together really out of a need, and not just to preserve, but to keep building, right? And to keep it thriving. And every single time we would do a show, we started with like 30 people at a time, but there'd always be somebody that would come. And it would be our way of introducing and giving people an entry point into Little Tokyo through cultural practice and through art and community work. So we've been doing everything virtually for the past 2 years, of course, and we're making our way back to a hybrid situation in April. So we've actually been live streaming for years, well before the pandemic. So we will always be doing that. But maybe this time we'll be using Zoom so there can be a little bit more engagement. So please, I invite you to come join us. I think we're not the longest running public art series, but we're the longest running Asian American public art series in the country. So I do invite you to join us. The next project I wanted to talk about is Tales of Clamor. And we're going to show just a couple photos here. This was a process that was created truly steeped in community. And it follows these two artists in the present having debates about cultural and institutionalized silencing and the power of breaking silence. So Nikki, I can't wait to talk to you more about your work, because I just feel so much resonance in these plays that we created. Our two artists, myself and my stage partner, Kennedy Cabasares, who's a circus artist, we see them go into these discussions about silence and noise. And we, throughout the play, go into the past. And we have a chorus of 5 actors that join us. And they play many characters, and we are watching this journey of struggling and grappling with breaking silence about their experiences in camp. And we see the journey of them making it to the 1981 commission hearings. So it's really anchored in that. It's a hybrid piece. So there's circus, it's based in theater, there's multimedia, and at the arc of the show, we have a particular edit from the Los Angeles CWRIC hearings. And it's something that we continue to work on. We're later this year going to keep developing it, and we, with the support of NIFA and community, hoping to tour it to places where there are critical masses of Japanese Americans, and especially to where there were commission hearings. So please stay in touch with me on that. I'm excited to talk more about that and what that means to engage with community through theater. We ran that piece for 5 weeks, and had so many different folks from many communities who were really affected and came into so many conversations with us about it. And at the same time, what I didn't quite expect was the impact also that it had on other Nikkei, other Japanese Americans. I think I didn't realize how many Japanese Americans of different generations and different ages didn't know about redress, the redress movement, and the breaking of silence through the commission hearing. So that was wild. So lastly, I just want to end with this book project, Navigating Without Instruments. This is a piece that I usually read right around this time. And this is about my grandpa. So I'm going to read this for you right now. It's called No Redress. No museum, no monument, no poem, no song can house the spirit of a past soul like that of my grandfather, who died before justice could meet the old man at his mailbox. Grandpa never got to stand in line at the bank, 3 inches taller with redress check in hand, 1 foot in front of the other, feeling grounded again. Never got to deposit an apology in his savings account. Never got to wonder of how he might spend this money on new equipment for the nursery, or a truck for himself, or college money for his grandchildren, or for once take the most takai cuts from the fish truck man. Most years in April, I attend pilgrimage. I say hello, Manzanar. I bow at the graves. I speak to the wind of my hopes for afterlife to be a real thing. Not so I can see Grandpa again, but for him to look around today, jump into the circle, dance the tankabushi and watch me get it right, and see our friends, all our relations, learn what we mean by chosen family. We're here, not only to remember, but to remind the local docents this place will never be a museum. This body will never forget. And we leave pilgrimage with pledges as concrete as the monument. We sing songs to keep each other awake on the long ride home. We lose sight quickly. Rearview mirrors, a pitch black sky, where they close the gate at the hour they have had enough of us, where we leave behind parts of our best poetry, where I hope not, but think Grandpa sits still, waiting. Thank you so much for this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Wow, just a wonderful way to sort of begin bringing this weekend to a close. Finally, let me introduce our final speaker for this panel, Setsuko Winchester. Setsuko is a journalist turned ceramic artist, best known for the Yellow Bowl Project, a meditation on freedom in America from an Asian American perspective. Her work has been exhibited at many venues, most notably the FDR Library's exhibition of the 75th anniversary of Executive Order 9066. Setsuko has worked for NHK, WNYC, and NPR, and her work uses art to explore history. Welcome, Setsuko, and thank you so much for being here today.
Anniversary of the reckoning.
You're good.
Sorry. Am I on? Hello?
Yes, you're good. You're good.
I just want to thank you for including me in this 80th anniversary of the reckoning of FDR's signing of Executive Order 9066. As you said, I was actually included in the 75th anniversary 5 years ago yesterday on February 19th, 2017 for FDR Libraries exhibition called Images of Internment. And the exhibit consisted basically of photos from the archives by WRA photographers who are now famous, like Dorothea Lange, Ansel Adams, Clem Albers, Francis Stewart. And I think there was a couple by Japanese Americans, George and Frank Hirahara. But other than that, there was no other Japanese American voices in the show. And I became part of it sort of by accident because the director of the show, of the archives of the FDR Library Museum, heard that there was a woman running around the West with 120 ceramic tea bowls and bringing them to the deserts and swamps and photographing them, and also asking to bring them to the steps of the Supreme Court and places like the Four Freedoms Rotunda in Massachusetts, where Norman Rockwell's famous Four Freedoms paintings are, or the Four Freedoms Park on Roosevelt Island. So that is what I was doing, which is the Yellow Bowl Project. And if you could show my first picture, I went to 10 US concentration camps and 5 places that for me symbolize freedom from fear, because that's the original name of my project, Freedom from Fear, Yellow Bowl Project. And then I also took them to 2 additional places to show the difference between a US concentration camp and an internment camp, because internment camps did exist in the 1940s and 1942, but they were for foreign nationals, US citizens of Japanese ancestry were put into US concentration camps, which is what the FDR administration called them. And they were planning them before Pearl Harbor. So it really didn't have anything to do with Pearl Harbor. So anyhow, this is a picture of Poston. It's on Native American reservation land. And it's one of the few places that had adobe barracks. Most of them had wooden and tar paper. But yeah, we had to crawl through a hole in a fence, not barbed wire, but a fence, and physically take all the tea bowls through there. But this is to show, I use this picture because it shows that each group of tea bowls is a family. It's like the front ones is 2 parents and then a teenager and maybe a baby. And then there's other families, and they're all glazed in different combinations and shades of yellow to show that they were individuals. They were not one swarm that were identical. They were people. They were humans. They had, flaws. They were imperfect. And 2 questions that I'm often asked is why yellow and yellow peril, which is what they were called. And the other question is why T-bowls? And I use T-bowls because number one, it's a basic thing in ceramics, which I've sort of dabbled in most of my adult life. But it also, for me, the T-bowl symbolizes the philosophy of tea symbolizes and celebrates nature and humanity in all its imperfections. So this is what I use. Also, another point is that in a lot of my research, I found out that when families left, you can't take all your teapots and teacups with you. And you hear this story all the time where, you know, the family or the mother broke all the tea bowls or teapots because they'd rather break them than to have somebody take it or sell it to somebody who couldn't appreciate it. So you always hear about these tea bowls and teapots being broken. And also I found out that at most of these camps, when most of them, you know, were razed, all the buildings disappeared. They've only recently, because of Jack's grants and all the National Park Service, and because of works by the redress movement, that they're coming back to life, and the history is being recorded. But there a lot of what was left supposedly were shards of tea bowls. So that's another reason why I did that. So anyhow, I, growing up from parents, my father came after the war. We did not know about this. And in fact, a lot of Japanese Americans didn't want to have anything to do with the Japanese who came after the war because we were the enemy. So I was introduced to a Japanese American boy when I was younger, I remember, and they said, "Oh, he's Japanese." And I said to him, "Oh, you're Japanese too." And he said, "I'm not Japanese, I'm an American." And so already you could tell there was tension among the Japanese American community and population. So since then, I've learned so much. I've been researching this history for like over 10 years now. And also it's led me to just what it means to be American, and that it has to do with the rule of law. And it's separate from slavery, race law. Slavery is about property, ownership of property. But race law is very specific. It says you had to be white. And if you weren't, there were all these laws. So anyway, this is what led to the mass incarceration, forced removal of Japanese people. So that's Manzanar. And the next one is, that's Minidoka. It's one of my favorite photos. It shows a storm coming, that's how I felt. This was back in 2015. And then the next one is, that's Topaz. That is where the church used to be. So, a third of the incarcerees were Christians. So religion didn't save you either. And the next photo is, okay, so this is Ellis Island, and this was an actual internment camp. And then the next photo. Oh, so this also is the Supreme steps of the Supreme Court. This was to show that it was unconstitutional. Anyway, I'm running out of time, and this is one of my favorite because it's very personal. This image is Norman Rockwell's Freedom from Fear, and it shows two parents putting in their children safely to bed, and that yellow bowl in the forefront sort of represents me. I took 120, but secretly there's actually 121. So that one's me. And I'm saying that this is who Americans were afraid of, me. and then the next one is, I think there's one. Yeah. So then I finally took them to the Four Freedoms Park in Roosevelt Island in New York. And although I've been able to sort of express this at each one of these places, I have faced a kind of censorship, and I could talk about that later. But anyway, thank you so much for including me. I'm so honored, and I think you all are doing amazingly important work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Setsuko. We are going to bring everyone back on screen now. This was fantastic. I mean, I know folks watching couldn't see the backstage chat, but it was just so lovely to see all of us interacting with each other and each other's work, and just I'm feeling so full and so inspired right now. So thank you for that. I want to invite folks in the chat to also submit questions and thoughts. If we don't get to them, our artists here can still see them afterwards and respond in a different medium perhaps. But something I kind of want to start us off by asking each of you, you all spoke about in different ways your families and your ancestors and where you come from and how that informs and shapes your art. And that's something that I think has really been infused into a lot of our Day of Remembrance programming, thinking about what it means to remember. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what Day of Remembrance means to you. How do you approach this marker, this anniversary, or maybe this particular one this year? And what relationship maybe you see between art and social movements? Because we heard yesterday in some of our panels about how art was really at the foundation of the earliest DOR celebrations. So maybe, Nikki, that is a huge question. Take it what you will. I keep saying this in every question I ask, but Nikki, I'll pass this to you first, maybe to share some of your thoughts.
Well, I feel that, when I started out by saying something about full circle, and this is for the first time, I think, that I feel the impact of legacy. And I always thought of legacy as a highfalutin term, but I do feel that we all share this legacy. And I have felt for quite a while now that I am a part of 120,000 stories. And not only that, but these stories that keep going on and then that branch out, and not only from our own communities, not only for Nikkeis, but especially what's happening now, I think is extraordinary. Some of you work with Tsuru for Solidarity or familiar with Tsuru for Solidarity, but for me, it's amazing being 84 years old and have ventured, I think when we first had our meeting, I said the winds of change have, blown me here and there. And also being a performer, I've been on the road most of my life, and I still feel like I'm on the road. I feel like I'm an insider outsider. I'm outside. We are all people of color are outside in many ways. And yet we've found our families, we found our connections. For me, it's been through art, and mainly through the performative arts. So I do feel that this 80th anniversary is a very significant. And here's a person who used to kind of poo-poo, these anniversaries and these dates and so forth. So really, for the first time, I do feel a profound sense of belonging, for which I am very grateful. And I do believe that we all share, so many legacies. Well, for one thing, one of the races we belong to is the human race. And I think this is our ultimate concern right now. So I'll pass this on to someone else, someone younger and more present.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Erin, maybe I'll pass this to you next.
Oh, sure. In the Seattle area, we had a great day yesterday, both in Puyallup, where the Assembly Center was, and then we moved down the road, just 8 miles down the road to Tacoma, where there's a big detention center. And it was just powerful, first of all, to see each other in person and to remember that anytime, we gather on pilgrimage or to honor a solemn event, it's powerful to be in each other's presence, and to revel in the joys and the sorrows that we've had and we've faced together. But we just made sure that our programming, had a lot of taiko medicine and poetry and the full range, and that we brought our support to this other community that we've been really trying to stand up for, to really contradict the fact that not enough folks stood up for us in 42.
Thank you so much, Erin. And yes, some of that, I saw some photographs and footage from that yesterday. It looked fantastic. And I'd encourage folks to go check it out, as well as the program that Traci was involved with yesterday in LA, which will be my segue to pass this question to you, Traci.
Sure. Yeah. I think anytime there's a day of remembrance, I'm always thinking about how we're connecting to right now and connecting to the future. So it was a great honor to be able to have Dreesen Heath come in from DC to speak with us. And, Dreesen is an advocate and a researcher and a leader in the Black reparations movement, and is someone we've been building with online for the past year. And so it was really awesome to just have her in person, first of all, but to sit down with her and Kathy Masaoka and just to really lean into what are these histories, these shared lineages, different lineages, right? But connected nonetheless. And so, I think it's through these stories, when people engaged in testimony, we talked a lot about that, how it's so powerful, right? And it's going to be powerful to hear more testimonies now of people speaking as descendants of slavery and Jim Crow, but also continued and maintained systems, right, and policies. So, but underneath all of that, when we think about the commission hearings of 81, the storytelling, right, and just how that changed us, that really changed the movement, and it took it forward. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Traci. And Derek. Derek, I'm sorry, you're muted again.
Gosh darn it. I'm really inspired by everyone here today. I'm just grateful to be a part of this. And I think that's wonderful about Day of Remembrance, is that even if it's just one day out of the entire year, that kind of forces us to revisit and reflect on this day. It's so powerful. Traci was saying in the chat, I hope you're writing something about your family. And I've conducted interviews with my family, and I've been sitting on this footage, and it's just been sitting in the back of my head of wanting to revisit that. And I think everyone's work and just the community, just for Traci to say something like that is so powerful for me, I know personally, in my art. So I'm just really appreciative of the community, and just being able to revisit all of this on this day.
Thank you so much, Derek, for sharing that. And Setsuko, any thoughts you'd like to share on this one?
Well, I think that EO 9066, although we talk about Japanese Americans, the law itself never specified Japanese people. It basically gave carte blanche and authority and power to the military to imprison and remove anyone it thought militarily necessary. So that is a law that can be used against anyone. And I think it's something that all Americans should know. And as a journalist, I know that I've constantly been on panels, or we have columnists or journalists who either repeat or say that, the loss of freedoms does not happen in America. It's something that happens over there, somewhere over there. And I think that this anniversary, even if it's every 5 years or every year or whatever, reminds us that that kind of injustice did happen here. And there's a whole long history of it. And so this is a segue to say that my project is actually a trilogy. And the second part is about the rule of law and race, and that it actually race does matter legally. So stay tuned.
Thank you so much, Setsuko. And I want to turn to one final question or opportunity for reflection, actually from the chat. So Haruka asks, thank you all for sharing your work with us, which I will also echo. Do you have any advice for artists and storytellers who are currently making work around the JA incarceration camps? So I will open that up to folks in whatever order you'd like to begin responding to that.
Do it. Yeah, just do it. We support you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There you go. Yeah, I needed to be unmuted. If you want to visit all 10 of them, one of the hardest places to get to is Gila River, because you have to apply, and it's on Native American land. So it has to go through a committee, and so you should start early. But I think there's a lot of support now for artists who want to visit the sites, and a lot of them now have support from National Park Service or whatever. So yeah, I think it's worth it to go to all 10 of them. It's amazing. They're all amazingly powerful, but it's also isolated, so hard to get to. On the East Coast, no one knows that they exist. Nobody's heard of any of them. And they all sort of act like, what are you talking about? They don't teach it in school over here. They don't actually. And so part of my project was to bring the camps to the people, because I can go there, but most people won't. So that's also part of my project.
Oh, Nikki, I'm just
to know about people we can contact in these various sites. When I came to New Mexico, I just felt that there was so much good work being done by so many good people, but that we are so isolated and we are so busy and occupied with our own projects. But here is an opportunity, and I think, to connect the dots. So here we are, this is the 21st century. I can't believe I'm here. And this is virtual, and I don't understand any of it. But this is really a great opportunity for us to stay connected. So anybody who wants to know about the 4 confinement sites in New Mexico, they can contact me. And I am in contact with many other, in other locations. And I am just so grateful to be introduced to all of you, because I think we share one thing, and it's storytelling. And also increasingly important is story sharing with others. So thanks so much.
I would just offer, to start from a personal place. What is it that's burning inside of you that you need to explore, and how does it sit with you now in the present? And how does it inform what you want to do next, and who you want to work with? And then I think process-wise, I really do believe so much, and maybe it's because I come from theater, and that's a space of collaboration, right? Filmmakers share this as well. Actors share this as well. So I think, collaborating with people who are in the community, for us with our show, with Tales of Clamor, it was, NCRR, activists, elder, organizers were as much my creative collaborators as my fellow actors and writers and creative team, right? Everybody was considered a creative collaborator. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of Tracy's sentiments perhaps, but my advice would be to go on pilgrimages when they start again. If they do, I hope they do. And really and understand the heart of these stories, and get kimochi, not just history. The history is important too, but to have, like Tracy said, your own really meaningful connection to whatever project you decide to embark on, that just really honors the history of our people, and How about Derek?
Oh, well, today with social media, it's so easy to just reach out to anyone, including all of us, but organizations and museums as well. And, everyone is telling stories. Everyone has their own platforms that if you have something personal and that you want to share, especially regarding, the incarceration. I think everyone is itching to tell these stories that have been swept under the rug in the past. But the internet's just opened it up, and so many things are coming to light that we weren't aware of before. So keep telling your stories.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, all 5 of you, for sharing your work with us. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for sharing these thoughts. I think we've left most of your social media handles, etc., in the chat so folks can follow along with what you're up to. And I know I learned so much from each of you, and I'm always, left with so much to chew on. So just thank you so much for your time. I want to say another thank you to our planning partners behind this event, the Japanese American National Museum, the JACL National, Friends of Minidoka, the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. A huge thank you to Kimiko Mar behind the scenes for running slides and keeping us all on track. I'm sorry for popping on and off so many times today. And just a huge thank you to all of our community partners and all of you who are watching. This has been such a meaningful and special weekend. We have one more program, again, in about 50 minutes. Please do join us if you can. And otherwise, just thank you so much to the 5 of you. Please take care of yourselves. And folks watching along at home, please take care. And we will see you again soon. Thank you.